Hi there, wonderful people. Welcome to my channel. So, we are continuing the discussion of establishing your core value system using Jyotish as well as psychology. The Excel sheet will be linked in the description box. You can do this exercise yourself if you know a fair degree of Natal Chart and Navamsha and so on. There's enough material on this channel for that. So, now we speak of external action versus internal action. External is everything that shows up in your natal chart, and internal is everything that shows up in your Navamsha chart and after your Saturn maturity or the age of 30. Alright, since that is established, a couple of points you always have to remember regarding this is whatever shows up in your physical reality will always be dictated in the natal chart itself. However, what starts showing up as you progress through the age from 0 to 30, you are actually developing your Navamsha only. Okay, it's a slow progression. It's not like overnight you'll flip a switch and then you'll come to Navamsha. That's not the way Jyotish works. Navamsha is being geared towards establishing after 30. Okay, so you might say, as you are born and from the time you come into this planet and start absorbing everything that's going on in your friends, family, education, whatever your circumstances are, and then you move till 30, you're maturing. Saturn is taking one round of the entire zodiac, isn't it? That's a Saturn maturity at 30 years. And then you start becoming more of your internal self in the external world. And it shows up more dominantly in your intimate relationships, like marriage, for example. Since your internal self is very blatantly exposed to a total stranger when you're saying, I want to be intimately involved with anyone. That happens very fast if you are involved with someone. This is why in the older tradition, there was always caution given for intimate engagement. In the Vedic tradition, it was always encouraged, get married and then engage with intimacy. Don't do it before that because you're starting your Navamsha earlier than required. You don't have a maturity to deal with intimate relationships. All these culture going around of body count and all that thing is really rubbish. It is spoiling your core structure, making it very corrupted in terms of energies. You should not engage like this with irresponsibility. Okay, back to this. So external reality will show up as Mars. We are talking about action. Internal action is really speaking your Navamsha Mercury. Everything external is taken in this study as natal chart, Mars in natal chart. Internal action is Mercury in your Navamsha chart. In the natal chart, it is still developing. In Navamsha, it's where it starts maturing. We're talking about maturity, everything happening post 30 years of age. That's what we're talking about. So how does this work? Look at where your Mars is placed in your natal chart and look at where Mercury is placed in your Navamsha chart. There's enough material on Navamsha here in the Navamsha playlist for all who wish to go through. There's a comment saying, what is Navamsha? Well, go to the playlist. You'll find everything you need to there. So, we will take Mars as the external drive. What you show up in the world is really your Mars. Mars takes the action. Mars is an action-oriented Kshatriya planet. So every action, goal, target, achievement, motivation, etc., that you will take in the external world is really Mars in your natal chart. The sign, the nakshatra, and so on. The internal action, what do I mean by internal action? Your intellect processes it in a certain way. Whatever is happening in the external world, you will process it in the internal way, which is to say, your Mercury, which is sitting in your Navamsha chart, the sign, the nakshatra, everything else, and whatever is aspecting it, conjuncting it. You can take all those aspects, of course. So this is what we are studying. I will leave the Excel worksheet now. We'll describe the Excel worksheet. Keep watching, and then later on I will describe how the principles play out. So you can share this, subscribe to this. We shall discover more of this and probably do the case studies as well. Listen in. So on your screen right now, you can see the Excel worksheet. I shall leave a link directly on my Google Drive to this. You can download this and work it yourself. This can also be a self-help. This can also be an investigation if you're a mainstream counselor, psychologist, etc. So this Excel worksheet basically is taken off a good source, reliable source on the internet. These column, the central column you see over here, core values, are a set of 100 value systems if you scroll through, which will give you what it is you're looking for, what resounds with you the most. Okay? So there are totally 100 of them, right from A to Z in alphabetical order, which says what is it we are trying to measure. We are trying to measure 100 parameters. So kind of go slow on this. I urge you not to rush through this whole thing. It's quite deep and it's quite revealing, you might say. Okay. So first is the core values which are listed over here. There are totally 100 core values we work for as humans. And the category of external, internal, you don't have to bother with these columns. Okay. This is all merged and matched and all that. See, external plus status gives external status and so on. So this is the way it is mapped. External and internal status, responsibility, action, cause, creation. And all you have to do is focus when you download this Excel sheet on this answers column. You have to rate each one on a scale of 1 to 10. I have just done a sample here. Be very careful how you rate yourself. Don't give full marks to everything. No, this is not a competition. Okay? This is for you to understand your core values. What makes sense to you? And it's a scale. It's not a black and white. It is not a yes and no answer. So 1 to 10 we have evaluated. Colors will change by themselves. Ignore all those other things. You have to focus only on giving yourself scale of 1 to 10 against each one of these core values where you stand. Suppose I say accountability matters to me a lot. That is 10 marks. Give yourself 0 generally wherever you find a no value attachment. That's the important thing. The instructions for use are here, which says give yourself 0 generously. If these values you do not normally consider for yourself, try and avoid scaling every value evenly. Okay? Because we want to get to the core. And all these things are calculated. These values and focus areas, everything is calculated. There are pie charts and so on. Okay. So in terms of planets, in terms of Jyotish, what does this mean? Your external world, external status is dominantly Sun in your natal chart. This pie chart is fully for your natal chart. External status being Sun, external responsibility being Saturn, external action being Mars, external cause being Rahu or the north node of the moon, external creation being Venus. And what are the descriptions here? See the listed ones. External status is that which the self gets from the outside world. Your status in the world. That's the Sun in your natal. External responsibility. That which the self holds responsible to in the external world. That's Saturn. External action, that which the self takes action in the outside world, that's your Mars. External cause, that which is caused by external world to drive the self, that is your Rahu. Invariably I've seen in every chart. Your external creation, that which is created by the self in the external world, is Venus. Now Venus is the only thing common between external and internal creations. You create essentially Venus on this earth plane. So the internal status, that which the self gets from within, is Moon in your Navamsha. Internal parts, all of these planets shown, is only your Navamsha, by the way. Internal responsibility is your Jupiter, whatever you hold accountable. That which the self holds responsible to itself. It's a very highly internalized planet, Jupiter. Doesn't show in the external world. External world only sees your face. Internal world is your Jupiter. Internal action is shown by Mercury, or intellect, which is hidden. Jupiter, Mercury, quite hidden. That by virtue of which the self takes action in the outside world, caused from within. Ketu, once again, is a very internal point. Internal cause is Ketu. See where Ketu is placed in your Navamsha. That is what is driving yourself in the external world, which will become dominant after you cross the age of 30. Internal creation, that which is created as value. Remember, second house Venus, I have spoken of Venus as your value system. Okay. So keep this background in mind. I shall keep these two introductory slides in every podcast, and the rest of it is a voiceover. Have patience, listen, understand, leave your comments if you find something else, if you're mainstream, if this appears on the LinkedIn newsletter, and if it is cut short because the platform only allows me 15 minutes. Okay, I can't pack the whole thing in 15 minutes. I won't be doing any justice to it. Entire video is on YouTube. You can watch it on YouTube. Even the people listening on Apple and Spotify and other podcast channels, listen in now.
Core values, external action versus internal action. From Natal to Navamsha, let's talk about action, because action is where your values stop being theory and start becoming reality. Everyone acts, but not everyone acts from alignment. Most people act from pressure, expectation, habit, or fear of consequences. Jyotish allows us to see why you act the way you do, and whether that action is truly yours. This is where the difference between external action, Natal, and internal action, Navamsha, becomes profoundly revealing. External action, how natal pushes you into motion. External action is about how you move in the world. In the natal chart, action is goal-driven, outcome-oriented, reactive to circumstances, shaped by competition, deadlines, survival, and ambition. Externally, action answers questions like, what must be done next? How do I get results? How do I respond to pressure? This is the kind of action that builds careers, reputations, and momentum. You learn early that acting fast is rewarded, acting decisively earns respect, acting consistently creates stability. So external action becomes efficient, sharp, and often relentless. But efficiency does not always mean alignment. Internal action, how Navamsha decides whether action is sustainable. Internal action is quieter and far more honest. It is not about speed, it is about inner permission. Navamsha asks, does this action make sense to my mind? Does it violate my inner rhythm? Can I repeat this action for years without losing myself? Internal action governs motivation, mental energy, intention, the inner logic that precedes every outer move. This is why two people can take the same action externally. One thrives, the other collapses. The difference is not strength, it is internal alignment. When external and internal action are misaligned. This misalignment is one of the most common sources of burnout. Externally, you may be acting assertively, competitively, constantly, without pause. Internally, however, your system may need reflection, planning, emotional pacing, meaning before movement. So you keep moving, but the fuel is wrong. You may notice overthinking before acting, mental exhaustion without physical exhaustion, a sense of I'm busy but not fulfilled, increasing irritability toward action itself. This is Navamsha warning you. Your actions are no longer synchronized with your mind. How sign shifts redefine the nature of action. A sign shift between natal and Navamsha changes the reason behind action. Imagine a person whose natal action is expressed through a sign that values speed, courage, initiation, dominance. Externally, this creates a doer, a starter, a fighter. Now imagine that same action planet shifting in Navamsha to a sign that values strategy, communication, emotional intelligence, adaptability. Internally, action now requires mental clarity and context. So life begins to feel like this. I can act fast, but I don't want to anymore. I want to understand before I move. I need the action to make sense in my head first. This is not hesitation. This is evolved action. House shifts, when action turns inward. House shifts between Natal and Navamsha often explain why people suddenly lose interest in hustle. An action-oriented planet may sit in a highly visible or competitive house in Natal and shift to a learning, reflective, or relational house in Navamsha. Externally, action is about proving. Internally, action becomes about refinement. You may still act, but you act less frequently and more deliberately. This is when people say, I don't want to react anymore. I want to choose my battles. I want my actions to mean something. Navamsha teaches that restraint is also action. The mental cost of misdirected action. Here's a truth most people don't want to admit. Action without internal agreement creates mental debt. You may achieve externally, but internally you accumulate irritation, anxiety, second guessing, self criticism. The mind starts resisting movement. Procrastination appears, not because you are lazy, but because your internal action engine has withdrawn consent. This is why Navamsha is ruthless. It does not allow you to lie to yourself forever. The maturity of aligned action. Aligned action feels very different. It is quieter, less performative, more precise, deeply sustainable. You stop acting to prove worth. You start acting because the action itself feels correct. At this stage, action becomes intentional instead of impulsive, responsive instead of reactive, integrated instead of scattered. Externally, it may look like you're doing less. Internally, it feels like you are finally moving in the right direction. The deeper teaching Navamsha brings, Navamsha teaches that action is not power, direction is power. External action builds movement. Internal action builds meaning. When these two align, effort stops feeling forced. You act, not because you must, but because your mind and your will are finally speaking the same language. Thoughts to sit with. As you reflect on your life and your chart, let these questions echo gently. Which of my actions give me momentum and which drain my mind? Where am I acting out of urgency rather than clarity? If I removed pressure and expectation, what actions would still feel necessary? What would change if I allowed my inner rhythm to set the pace? These are not questions about productivity. They are questions about how you want your energy to move through this lifetime.
Mars as external action, Mercury as internal action. Examples. Action is not just what you do. Action is why you move, how you decide, and what mentally triggers motion. In this framework, Mars in Natal D1 shows external action, how you fight, push, assert, initiate, and execute in the outer world. Mercury in Navamsha D9 shows internal action, the mental wiring that decides whether, when, and how you act. Many people look active externally but feel frozen inside. Others overthink internally and underperform outwardly. That gap is where frustration, anger, and anxiety are born. Let's ground this with lived examples. Example 1, Mars in Aries, 1st house, Mercury in Virgo, 6th house. Externally, action is bold, fast, instinctive, and self-directed. This person charges forward and initiates without hesitation. Internally, the mind wants analysis, correctness, and usefulness before moving. Over time, impulsive action begins to clash with an inner need for precision. Core tension, impulse versus analysis. Maturity lesson, speed without thought wastes energy. Example 2. Mars in Capricorn, 10th house, Mercury in Pisces, 12th house. Externally, action is disciplined, strategic, and goal-oriented. This person executes relentlessly and performs under pressure. Internally, the mind operates through intuition, imagination, and emotional absorption. Overexertion creates mental fog and exhaustion. Core tension, execution versus intuition. Maturity lesson, action must breathe to remain effective. Example 3, Mars in Gemini, 3rd house, Mercury in Taurus, 2nd house. Externally, action is quick, verbal, multitasking, and restless. Movement happens through communication and constant interaction. Internally, the mind prefers steadiness, repetition, and security. Scattered effort drains mental strength. Core tension, activity versus stability. Maturity lesson, consistency multiplies effort. Example 4, Mars in Cancer, 4 Mercury in Capricorn, 10th house. Externally, action is emotionally driven and reactive. Decisions are shaped by moods, protection, and emotional bonds. Internally, the mind demands structure, planning, and results. Emotional action without strategy feels unsafe. Core tension, emotion versus structure. Maturity lesson, feelings need direction to become strength. Example 5, Mars in Leo, 5th house, Mercury in Aquarius, 11th house. Externally, action is dramatic, expressive, creative, and leadership-oriented. This person acts when inspired or admired. Internally, the mind is objective, future-focused, and collective-oriented. Ego-driven action begins to feel limiting. Core tension, self-expression versus objectivity. Maturity lesson, leadership matures when vision exceeds ego. Example 6, Mars in Virgo, 6th house, Mercury in Sagittarius, 9th house. Externally, action is precise, service-based, and problem-solving. Effort is directed toward fixing and improving. Internally, the mind seeks meaning, philosophy, and broader understanding. Endless correction feels mentally suffocating. Core tension, detail versus purpose. Maturity lesson, effort needs meaning. not just efficiency. Example 7, Mars in Libra, 7th house, Mercury in Scorpio, 8th house. Externally, action is diplomatic, cautious, and relationship-centered. Conflict is avoided, balance is prioritized. Internally, the mind is intense, investigative, and uncompromising about truth. Politeness without honesty becomes unbearable. Core tension, diplomacy versus depth. Maturity lesson, truth must not be sacrificed for peace. Example 8, Mars in Scorpio, 8th house, Mercury in Gemini, 3rd house. Externally, action is intense, strategic, and survival-driven. Effort is focused and all or nothing. Internally, the mind is curious, restless, and constantly shifting perspectives. Mental scattering dilutes external power. Core tension, intensity versus flexibility. Maturity lesson, adaptability preserves strength. Example 9, Mars in Sagittarius, 9th house, Mercury in Virgo, 6th house. Externally, action is idealistic, adventurous, and belief-driven. The person acts for principles and causes. Internally, the mind demands practicality, method, and tangible usefulness. Idealism without execution creates frustration. Core tension, belief versus method. Maturity lesson, ideals survive only when grounded. Example 10, Mars in Pisces, 12th house. Mercury in Aries, 1st house. Externally, action is indirect, sacrificial, and often invisible. Energy leaks through confusion or overgiving. Internally, the mind is sharp, decisive, and impatient. Mental urgency clashes with passive action. Core tension, surrender versus assertion. Maturity lesson, clarity is a form of courage. Core principles to take away. 1. Mars shows how you act. Mercury shows why you act. 2. Anger appears when Mars moves faster than Mercury can justify. 3. Anxiety appears when Mercury overthinks Mars into paralysis. 4. Sustainable action happens when instinct and intellect cooperate. Maturity is not doing more. It is acting with internal clarity. When external action Mars and internal action Mercury align, effort becomes efficient, courage becomes intelligent, and action finally feels right, not forced.